This is a notice of a special call work session for October the 13th, 2022. And so we're here to talk about recovery facilities, residential recovery facilities, and this is a discussion for the court. And we have all the members of the court except for Squire Marty Booth, who will be here in just a bit. And we have Robert Hewitt to help lead this discussion. So, Mr. Hewitt, you've had some conversations with Mr. Hart, and you've had conversations with the BZA board, and can you give us kind of your thoughts, or do you want to just let the court side, but just give us kind of an update, if you would, an overview of where we are, and what is transpiring, and including in that update, I believe you give us an update on the best you can of the facility. There is a facility, I believe, that has been approved or is in the process of approval.
Yes, so thank you and good evening, court. Earlier this year, the planning commission held a public hearing relating to the text amendment to the zoning ordinance, and then that was forwarded on to the fiscal court here, in which the fiscal court did adopt this residential recovery facility land use along with a list of conditions that would go with it. Soon thereafter, my office received an application for a facility on Johnson Road that was then forwarded to the Board of Zoning Adjustments. Of course, this is the first case, and for both staff as well as the Board of Zoning Adjustments. So, as typical fashion for these types of cases, we notify all the utility companies, emergency responders, road department, county engineer, things of that nature, health department in this case, but there's no public sewers, and made a recommendation to the Board of Zoning Adjustments. And at that time, the board did grant the conditional use permit with the conditions listed in the ordinance, but also added a note or a condition that once the facility is operational, that your staff, your planning staff, report back to this body, the fiscal court, and discuss any activity at the facility as it relates to ambulance calls, public protection, fire runs, things of that nature, so that in the event that this body felt as though the ordinance needed to be amended, that you at least have a baseline of information to do so. The facility on Johnson Road is not currently in operation. He did a site visit today. He didn't see any activity as such. You know, of course, the leaves are on the trees still, so you didn't see a whole lot going on. But my understanding, and based on the requirements from outside agencies, i.e., the health department, and the water department, and such, and the fire chief, the facility is not in operation at this time, even though they have received a permit. So the fiscal court has had numerous discussions amongst themselves and with me to consider additional or modified conditions on this land use. I've done some extensive research in other communities. As I've reported back to this board, you know, some have no regulations on it, you know, some of them just allow them to happen, or they have limited regulations on them, but they appear to be quite prevalent in other communities across the Commonwealth. And I've talked about colleagues, planning directors that I actually went to college with, who are now planning directors in their respective communities, you know, who have them, and so they don't hear anything out of them. And so I've looked them up on, not only have I researched them on the internet, but then I've gone into the mapping software and located them, looked at the surrounding areas, things of that nature. You know, there's some in commercial districts, there's some in residential districts, and we've all discussed these things before, but it just shows that they're, and depending on the degree of care they provide is whether or not they're where they locate, generally speaking. And so as it relates to me providing any recommendation of any changes to the ordinance at this time, I really don't have anything to offer because we don't have any experience in this yet. It's not opened. And I really don't have anything to provide guidance. I mean, the court, I thought did a great job of vetting this along with the planning commission. As I said, they had a public hearing. But in the absence of it occurring, and I don't know if there's anything, I don't have a suggestion at this point. I will say that it is very commonplace for my office to recommend amendments to our regulations, whether it be zoning, subdivision, development regulations, when we find that something doesn't work or something isn't practical. I gave an example in a discussion with Judge Wells when the city and county adopted the new, what I call new subdivision development plan regulations back in 2006. City and county had hired a consultant from out of town, they did all this stuff, and while the regulations look great on paper, they didn't work in the field. It wasn't practical, and so I took it upon myself, both when I was a city employee as well as a county employee, to start to make these changes that made it practical, that worked for everyone. And I would do the same for any other ordinance that I administer. If something's not right, if something's not working, if we overlook something, I would research it and I would come back to this body and say, I'm having issues with this, because it would be my office that would deal with it. More so because it's a conditional use permit, which grants me the right to inspect the property at a minimum of once a year to ensure compliance with the permit. Notify the board of zoning adjustments if there is a violation of the permit is revocable by the board of zoning adjustments. And so I would never hesitate to come back to this body and say, hey, we've got a problem. We ought to amend this. But at this time, since there's no activity, I'm at a loss.
There's just one second, Squire. There's two things I hear. One, I'm hearing you're suggesting that we do nothing at this point in time until you see something in operation to see what the issues are. But I think there's an important statement I'm not sure that I didn't hear you say, but the court needs to understand that no matter what happens, changes are made, it would not affect what is already in place. Is that correct? And there is a facility permitted to be in place. So the court's discussion would be for the future development. Am I correct in that, Robert?
Future applications, that's correct. However, there is one caveat to that. If this facility wants to, let's say they want to enlarge the facility and acquire more clients, they would have to go back to the board of zoning adjustments for an amended conditional use permit. So at that time, the board of zoning adjustments has the flexibility and the authority to impose their own conditions they deem appropriate, or staff would refer back to the current ordinance as adopted or amended, if you will, and make the board aware of that. So there is that one little caveat. But yeah, as it stands today, if any changes are made by the court under the current ordinance, the permit would remain as it was adopted on that date.
So they have a license, but they're not licensed to open, right? Yeah, are they? They don't have the sewer. What are they doing about the water line?
Right. Well, that's one of the holdups too, because fire suppression is required.
Yeah.
And so they're exploring their options on how they're going to provide fire protection to meet the needs of Chief Brewer, excuse me.
Squire Mall.
Thank you, Judge. Robert, thank you for researching. I mean, I think you can appreciate, we're trying to get this right the first time, as close as we can, so
Yes.
it doesn't come back and nothing happens. In talking to your colleagues, which I appreciate you, reaching out to them, because they're the ones that are gonna understand what's going on. Did you by any chance bring up anything about numbers of facilities within their counties? Let it be in residential or in industrial or commercial? Did any of those conversations ever come up?
No, because there could be a case, see, not all planning offices deal with the business license side of it and things of that nature. So that's how my office knows when a business comes into town or a business moves, because we have to review the application, sure. Some other planning departments, they don't do that. But we did talk about companies, okay, because a company may have locations in Louisville, Lexington, and Owensboro, and so we would talk about companies and do you ever hear anything out of them, things of that nature. And then some companies may have multiple locations in the same town,
Mhm.
so, they would obviously be very familiar with that, but we didn't. But when I researched, and in conversations, when they would tell me the company name, I would immediately go and find all their locations, but it's very rare that you see. But now these are more, a lot of them are more inpatient type facilities, okay, where it's all sort of in the same structure, if you will. Which is slightly different than what our ordinance has, because Not Forgotten, I believe is the name of the company, they have their own office with their physicians and therapists and such in a commercial district, okay? This facility is just, for the lodging along with the staff of the clients that are within the program. So once again, it goes back to, they're not all the same. I
Right.
guess is what I'm getting at, because, Bowling Green, they have, three companies that I'm aware of. They have Life Skills, they have Journey Pure, and I forget the other one, but then, those companies have offices in different locations. Journey Pure has one in Bowling Green, they've got one in Albany. And the one in Albany is actually connected to the hospital, but they're in a separate wing of the hospital, so.
Okay.
Is that a resident, is that a recovery facility? It's not a psychiatric facility.
It's a recovery facility that has a medical doctor on staff, along with case managers, licensed therapists. They can prescribe medications and things of that nature, and then they do the drug and alcohol treatment within that same facility. So while you're free to leave at any time, you're within an organized structure. You're required to go to certain meetings, all stuff, and you don't leave the building, unless you discharge yourself.
Mr. Jim Boyd, welcome. Are you here representing a client or here just for discussion, or is this just to listen? Just to listen, okay. I just wanted to recognize you and welcome. Welcome. It's good to see you, my friend. Squire Sebastian.
I wanted to circle back to several meetings we've had to discuss some of the issues that have come up across the board of the court. None of this has any reference to one facility over another. It's just topics that we have discussed on the table for the past several months. One of them has been proximity. One has been density within whatever the facility is going to be, whether it's a residential home type structure or whatever is there. We've talked about infrastructure impact, a little bit of that again today. We talk about downstream water effects. We've talked about waste, whether that's an individual septic tank on the property, whether that's packaged plants that are operated in a neighborhood like Farmdale Sanitation covers and or Kentucky American Water. We've talked about traffic impacts out in the rural areas of the county. We've talked about for-profit businesses actually being in residential settings, which they are not designed for. We've talked about facilities like this going into a single family dwelling. And I will just use an example of a ranch type home that may have been built with 3 bedrooms and 1 bath. And then how would that configuration be inside? How would we work through that for it to be converted to a business type use where there is lodging 24 hours a day? We've talked about the impact on, I think, property values of contiguous properties and how that would impact with a business going into a residential type setting. We've talked about insurance impacts as well. We've talked about staffing requirements here and the levels that they would have to based on the type of services that are provided, just to ensure that we are understanding of that type of thing. And then I think Squire Muller just brought up, how many quantity within the community. So
And zoning.
Go ahead.
Zoning.
yes, sir. So with that, number of topics on the table, what would be is the pleasure of the court, I guess, still to keep that number of topics on the table and to begin addressing them maybe individually, or, and Judge, you drive it, you're driving the bus.
No, actually, I think, the court itself is driving the bus. We're all in the driver's seat here to try to move the bus forward. The whole idea of this is to have a discussion, and we only have an hour, now we only have 40 minutes left, that to come up with, we've got one option on the table, and that Robert presented that option. That option is to sit back and let something get open and then see
Then
what
2 or 3
the,
might open while we're sitting there.
well, there's a possibility. That's Robert, you can concur that that could be a possibility, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so, I mean, this is, the whole point of this is to determine where the court wants to go.
I think a good place to start is to go back to the zones. I think RV definitely needs to be out of there, and I would take RR out of there also. And I'm questionable on agriculture. But definitely RR and RV need to be out of there.
Robert, if you wouldn't mind, RR and RB, give us a synopsis of what RR and RB are and how.
RR is pretty broad because it's the large, I know it's pretty broad.
So they're both single family zoning designations, okay? So each one allows one single family home. They have different acreage requirements. RR is a minimum acreage of 1.5. All right. RB is 9,000 square feet. All right.
The structure has to be
The-
9,000,
No, the lot.
the lot.
900, you said?
9,000.
9,000.
9,000 square foot lot. And then, in the rural residential, if you have over 5 acres, then you're allowed to do some agricultural activity. All right, whereas in the RB, you're not. Both districts do allow for both minor and major home occupation. Typically, it's designed around arts and crafts and accountant working in spare bedroom, things of that nature. But for the most part, they're just single family exclusive.
I don't mean to change the subject, but speaking on that. What about all these people working from home? Does it impact the RR? I mean, they're in all these residential zones. Working for the state, working for.
Squire, if you don't mind, let's kind of keep it to the subject.
Okay, yeah, we can talk about that another time, but that is looming out there.
It is.
So I just want to recap. So in RR, you said if it's over 5 acres, they can have some type of work type activity. I think you said like an accountant. Some other examples of that would be
As a home office, yes.
as a home office. Okay. And you mentioned an accountant.
Yes, and so we do have some other
What else? Arts
major
and
home
crafts?
occupations. We've had several applications that were approved by the board for online firearm sales. We've had one person do cupcakes, for sale. People come up with all kinds of ideas of ways to be creative and to make money and be at home and things of that nature. So the list is not all inclusive. Sort of use discretion as to what we think is appropriate as a major home occupation and forward that on to the board.
Squire Moore, give us your opinion on why RR should be eliminated in RB.
Well, RB definitely, because it's a small lot, and if you're talking about putting in distance regulations. There's no way to do that in the RB. There's a small lot anyway. They're gonna be within 50 feet of any other dwelling. 100 feet.
Well, would that not be the case in
RR, that would be
commercial,
okay. But in what?
in commercial, or other area, industrial or something like that, could that not be the case as well?
It would be rare, it could, but it'd be rare, yeah.
But the distinguishing factor there is you have single family dwellings, I think,
All
as
around,
opposed to, right, all around. Is that what you're
that's what I'm
saying? Okay. I just want, I was trying to clarify for me. I just want to make sure I understand it too.
Or more, I thought that's where we left that off, that if it's RB, we had looked at doing privacy fence around it, and if it's RR, privacy fence or, evergreen trees or something like that. Isn't that a conversation we had? Because I think the mission of this is to get the
Yeah.
people in recovery back into a
RB.
normal situation, lifestyle.
RB, I don't see how any of these facilities could be in an RV.
Robert, in a typical RB, what would, and you had houses, what would you see around an RV?
Would that be present in Brentwood, something like that? Maybe like
Yes,
that.
yeah. Silver Lakes 1 and 2.
So you do see commercial
There's
around
commercial,
RVs.
Yes.
But they're kind of on the outskirts, this would let them right in the middle of the subdivision,
But now, once again,
they're not RB, those commercial buildings are not RB, they're commercial.
yeah, they're in commercial zoning.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
One activity that is allowed in residential, single family residential district that cannot be regulated by planning and zoning or statute are residential facilities for those with mental disabilities. There are private companies that run homes in which it's they the client reside in the home and there are staff members who care for them, and then they programs outside of the home, and they take them in their car and or take them to the grocery and just keep them active, because as long as I've lived in Frankfurt, I lived next door to one or two at all times. I've lived here 20 years. There's always one next door to me everywhere I move. I've only moved twice, but each time. So, but that's a program ran by the Cabinet for Health and Family Services, and the statute specifically states that planning and zoning cannot regulate those. But they are for-profit companies. There are quite a few medical runs, which is unfortunate, but the neighbors know.
Yeah.
They're just another neighbor that live there.
It's not more of a threat of safety as
But
much.
there have been issues, yes, there are issues in which law enforcement is called if the client is having a bad day.
Right.
Yes, there are issues.
I don't want to get off the subject much, but I think the biggest concern I have is the definition of the type of facility. Because if you go to hospital, sanitary, convalescent homes, rest homes, they have different regulations that fall in there. And I know that the planning commission's been known to make a definition suit a use. So would a residential recovery facility would that fall in the bounds of this, or would, say, a psychiatric type residential facility be considered the same type of facility? There's lots of gray areas there and lines that I think need to be delineated to where we can say, because, if you have say a 48-bed facility for troubled psychiatric patients and that they say they're a residential recovery facility, how do we know? How do we separate that?
And I apologize, I did not bring my ordinance with me. That determination falls at the staff level, with the guiding ordinances from the fiscal court. As you all recall, I've been working on this residential recovery facility for year and a half or longer, because I had never heard of one.
Right.
I didn't have anything in the code to compare it to. Didn't know what they did. It was a new animal to me, and I've been doing this for a very long time. And I've learned so much since then. But for instance, because I ask questions, if there's something that comes in, I don't know what it is, I can't figure it out, fortunately, the Deacons had an attorney that could come meet with me, and we met every week, because, I would have more questions, I do some more research. But, if we want to tighten up the definition, I mean, that would be just fine. Did we actually provide a true definition? Yeah, here it is, under recovery program, which is 155.010. Yeah, and it's specific to substance abuse. So that would separate it from, say, a psychiatric facility. In my interpretation of the definition.
And they have different things that affect them, where
Yes,
they can be.
They do. They are primarily located in a hospital type structure. And of course, we have sanitary and other things listed that probably show it in the professional office and some other, very few other districts. But
Mostly
the
commercial.
hospital element of a program kicks it into a different category.
So like you referenced earlier, like a wing of a hospital is something you would
Yes,
primarily see that.
correct. And then in my research, I saw some that were strictly hospital based, very intense programs, and there were some that were more on the lower level, kind of like what the ordinance that we adopted. Where, they're living together, they have their staff there, their counselors, still see them. But oftentimes that's in a commercial office space where they're, the doctors and therapists and stuff have, their case files and all that kind of stuff, meeting rooms, things of that nature. So this is much less intense than the hospital type setting facilities that I've seen. I've also seen them and this was over in Western Kentucky. It was it looked like a 2-story apartment building that had been rehabbed as a facility, but it was right across the street from single family homes. There was even one facility I saw that was the largest building in the town, and it was the high school that had been renovated for a facility, and it held 99 individuals.
When you have proximity to schools, daycare,
Right across the street.
things like that.
Oh, yes, it was right across the street. But it was the high school, biggest building, because I was on Google Earth, all that stuff, doing all the comparison, biggest building in that little town, 99 bed facility.
It seems to me like the issue before us where it comes to concern, and maybe this is just today, is residential. As opposed, it's the concern from resident, this facility being next to single family homeowners. We had talked about that from the very beginning, that was a possibility. And then as we went through the zones and where they would lie, we kind of said, well, it might work, it might not work. I understand where you are, Robert, with let this play out, but I do think that there are people that have concerns and that are looking for us to not let it get to the next facility, and then the next facility, and then moving down the line as well. But I do understand what you're saying, that we don't know what the issues are, but just like when you say that we have changed things, that there's no reason that 6 months from now, 8 months from now, 12 months, a year from now, that you can't come back and change it again, change it again, change it again.
You're exactly right. It's a living document. And if the change is based on some factual evidence, then that would support my recommendation to this body.
you said the proximity to homes, I mean. And we do have people that live right next to commercial, we have people that live right next to professional office. We have people that live right next to every zoning designation. And I truly think. The exact type of facility is very important. I've got this is a stack of CAD reports, police reports on one facility since its time of opening, and this is the companies that own them that are all tied together. The stuff from the county in which it's in. I think it really hinges that we make sure the type of facility it is before we let them get their foot in the door. That's huge. And making sure that they're aware before they try to buy property or anything else. I mean, I'm sure they do their research and they think it's okay, but like just on this one with the hospitals and sanatoria, I have a little text amendment here. Collector road. Is it on a collector road? Is it on a single road that nothing collects to it? Things like that. And I think we already have something that's coming that hopefully we can stop. But I just think the definition's huge and what we allow within that space. And we separate the two.
And so, based on what you're saying, what would you do? How would you define
Well,
how would you define whether you can or can't in a certain area?
if it's a mental health facility, if you've got people on, this is a mental health facility, but it was touted as the name of it is, it's something like, its name does not imply what it is. And I think it was disingenuous of the company that did it it's a for-profit company, and I don't want to call any companies out here in public. I don't want to do that at all.
Yeah.
But I just know that one facility in the state of Kentucky had this many calls in the time that it's open. And, from sexual assaults to attempted rape, escapes, AWOLs, assaults, bunches, police reports. And I just want to make sure that we don't let that happen in our community, because if we don't know and we haven't set standards, and if we wait for something like this to happen, it's already too late for that person. It's already too late for that person. But at the same time, we need drug treatment facilities in our community. We just have to. We've got people addicted to drugs living in every zone designation in Frankfurt, except maybe some of the commercial ones. But we're on an edge of a sword, and I think we've got to really be diligent about how we delineate what we got.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
I don't know anything about that. But what is stopping them if they were misrepresented from pulling the permit? Do you know? Because Robert keeps saying if they're not doing what they're supposed to do, or they're doing, what they, that it
In
could be.
this county?
Yeah, I'm just asking.
I don't know.
Right.
I don't know.
But see, if that's a mental health facility regulated by Cabinet of Health and Family Services, it could be the same one that I described earlier, which has a similar stack to that.
And we have no
Because
jurisdiction
I'm
over
the
that.
mayor. Yeah, we have no jurisdiction over that. I can't. do anything
But we
about
do
it.
have where they can go.
Well, no, I'm talking about the mental health facility.
Yeah, that's what I'm
And
saying too.
But once again, the statute's very clear. I cannot regulate the ones that are administered by the state.
We can't regulate them. We can just say where they go.
No, I can't even do that.
I mean,
I can't tell them they can or
They
cannot.
can't
do that.
fall without
Well,
outside of these zoning designations though, right?
Yes, they can.
Really?
He's saying the state can do it.
I'm happy to get the statutes in KRS 100.
No, I believe you. I
Because-
believe you.
Like I said, I was when I worked for the city one time, I lived next door to two, and I was woken up to the sound of explosions because the neighbor's car was set on fire. I mean, things like that.
Right, Jenny, without asking, going into details, the facility that you referenced, is that a
facility that is approved by the local?
It was a mental health.
Or is it approved by, is it a state ran?
No, it's not run by the state. It's run by a for-profit company. I guess it's overseen by the state.
Yes, they are for-profit companies, but they're regulated by the state.
But yeah, there were similar concerns raised by the community there
Yes.
before this happened. And so I just want to make sure, because you know, if it goes on a definition, people define things differently. Are we going by Merriam-Webster? Are we going by what this body says? Are we going by what that body says? Are we going by what an insurance company says? Well, you know, if it's a boat, they can't say it's a car. Insurance company won't do that. It's totally wrong. But our planning and zoning says you can't. So I want to make sure that we have our definitions right.
I agree 100% because that's the first thing that I go to, you know, what do you do? And do you fit in this code? And if so, in this definition, because if not, then it's either not permitted or.
Right.
The important.
But then do we have the problem of it falling under the state and they saying, step back, we're allowing it?
The state tries not to get involved in local zoning issues. But the state does provide standards for communities that adopt planning and zoning, you know,
Right.
of how we process applications. But from the administrative part of the ordinance, the definition is critical to me.
Right.
It's critical. And it's got, if that needs to be further defined, it only benefits.
Okay, Robert, so what's the process for further defining?
I don't know, but I didn't know what this thing was when it landed on my desk in the first place, so. Yeah, I've learned that these facilities, as I've said many times, run the gamut of home to hospital and everything in between. I mean, it's hard for me to put my finger on this. If this were an item, if this were a widget, I couldn't put my finger on one and say that's what this item is. No, it'd run across this table. There'd be so many different things that this use could be. And that's what's so difficult right now. I think there's
Do you
different
have
facets.
any thoughts on that since? this
Well, I
is
just-
out there going?
No, I think Robert totally understands what I'm saying.
Mhm.
And I think we're on the same page, but I believe what we're talking about today is different because we're talking about residential recoveries, drug treatment facilities. And I think that's different than what I'm concerned with.
Okay,
But at the same time, not everybody, most people are not in my backyard unless they have certain, I don't know, guarantees, which you can't, we're people. People fail at making good guarantees. So I just want to be as thoughtful as we can in our decisions.
Well, if I could make a suggestion, when we go back to looking at this definition, it does run the full spectrum. Whether the facility offers as a way to assist their clients. You can either do for religious means, clinical diagnosis, medical treatment, counseling, psychotherapy. And when that's covering everything. I
Right.
didn't read the entire parentheses section, but you're covering everything there. So you may say residential recovery facility, clinical only, and then you have certain zones for it. You could say, residential recovery facility, inpatient, residential setting, you can maybe set it up that way. Because right now the definition is covering everything.
Robert, again, we're trying to get this right as close as we can the first time, and I think we need this in our community. And I appreciate Squire Sebastian kind of making the list that this body has come up with. You know, so am I correct to say proximity and density are still kind of up to the court? Now, you had mentioned that there's things in place as far as, you know, P and Z and what goes through your office. So I'm assuming infrastructure, downstream effects, waste between health department and our office, traffic, staffing. Would that all be in your eyes covered under already what's in place?
Yes, since the court adopted it as a conditional use,
Okay,
the provisions of the zoning were specific to conditional uses. We have to analyze those in our technical report presented to the Board of Zoning Adjustments.
okay, and
we do
then,
a facility review to reach out to the agencies that would impact or serve the facility to see if they have capacity to serve, you know, which involve the number of residents, you know, things of that nature.
so then quantity would probably be left up to us then. Is that safe to say?
Quantity in terms of what?
How many are allowed in our community overall?
Well, the number, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying there's gonna be 50 that come in, but what if they do? You know, there's a lot of federal money out there right now and healthcare is a big
Right.
business. So I'm not saying that's gonna happen, but I think,
Before you go on this, let me ask you this question, 'cause can a community say that you can only have so many XYZs? And
I think Amber brought up with liquor licenses and stuff. That's
liquor
why.
licenses is going back to prohibition.
I didn't bring that up.
Yeah,
No,
Robert did.
Okay.
brought that up.
He said
Robert
those
brought that up.
States, those limits.
I just don't want to about that. I don't know.
I'll see another. If it,
I- I-
if it can be capped, I've not seen any other government regulation. I don't know the answer
Okay.
to that.
okay.
But your points, go ahead. Your points are well.
Thank you. And so then the other one is, you know, do we allow profit in residential areas? And I mean, obviously, I think we're gonna need to if we want drug facility, you know, places in our community. And as far as property values and insurance impacts, I mean, unless we talk to Jeff Hancock or an insurance agent, I don't know if we could sit here and come up with that. So I'm just trying to consolidate this list to maybe see what's already covered under current laws that we have in place and procedures and what is actually left for this court to talk about. Because if not, we're gonna be talking about it a year from now. So to me, you know, if we wanted to talk to Jeff, you know, Hancock about that, that leaves us with
PVA would be.
PVA, yeah, okay, yeah. Or insurance agent or something. So to me, that just comes down to the only thing left for us to decide is proximity and density. And quantity if it's legal or if it's necessary. And if anybody disagrees with me, let's talk because I just went down the list.
Well, but we do have Squire Moore talking about zoning districts too, which kind of can go to proximity and
Yeah.
density.
And I understand Squire Moore's hesitation and Squire Blackburn, nobody wants it in my backyard, but then we go back to a year from now, we all decided we need this in our community
We do.
to help people.
We
So,
absolutely do.
I mean, it's a tough thing. I mean, I think everybody agrees with that.
Because it looks like time's getting with us, we have to stop at 5 o'clock. It looks like we're gonna need to consider what Squire Moore has brought up. RR and RB, are they suitable? Are they the right zones for this? And it also, Robert, it looks like that is on the table, Squire Blackburn's request for a definition that, in his terms, the correct definition for a residential recovery facility. Those two are there, and the RR and RB can go along with it, with Squire Muller and saying that are they suitable, and if so, or if not, what is, and how do they fit within the residential areas? And it all goes back to how does everything fit within a residential area, because we know that's That's the issue.
But Judge, let's not lose sight, when it was presented to us, that's the purpose of this program, is to try to get people back to an everyday lifestyle, so.
And that can be done in a lot of different
Right,
areas
I
other
just-
than in single family residential area. I mean, I agree.
Yeah,
That was, let's make that perfectly.
Right, yeah,
clear. I need
yeah.
to say this, that we're not sitting here saying, let's not do it at all in Franklin County. We're trying to figure out where to do it in Franklin County, which is the most appropriate area that we can come up with. And it's gonna be very difficult to get to that point in an hour. And we've been dealing with this for a year and a half, and it's difficult to come up with that. So I'm just trying to bring us together to try to
Mhm.
capsulize this and see where we can go.
That's good stuff.
RR, anybody want to say any more about RR? Do we send it back to Robert and look at it? Is there any RR, remember, is at least, correct me, 1.5 acres?
Yes, sir.
And,
Huh?
and,
And up, at least 1.5 acres. RB is 9,000 square feet, and Robert, my math is not with me today. So how is 9,000 square foot an acre or less than it? It's less than. an
Less.
acre.
Yeah.
It's
It's
12
small.
acres.
43,000.
It's a small lot.
Yeah. very small. Yeah. Is there anybody on the court, other, Squire Moore, you want to push?
I want to take RV out for sure.
Okay,
I guess I don't, I'm sorry. And if we put 100-foot rule in there, I don't think it could be put in RV anyway. So I think RV.
well, we haven't got to
I
the
know we have.
proximity yet.
RR, questionable, the RB, I don't see any scenario where it would be okay with me.
The court, if I can, I'd just like to remind the court that the purpose of today's discussion was literally that, for discussion. Remember, you can take no actions amongst yourselves or direct at anything. This was for purposes of identifying the issues for future discussions and evaluations. It was a no call. It was a no call meeting. That is, no action can be taken.
That's what we're trying to do here. Is there, would the
Is
court
that
like to see
something we
this
need
brought back?
Is that something we need to pursue is what I'm asking.
That's what I'm trying to get to the court to say. Squire Tracy.
Thank you. Robert, can you give us an example of the for-profit activities that are allowed in the RD zone currently allowed?
So currently, your current ordinance allows for home offices. And then the major home occupation. So home office would be, like. If you're out on COVID, you're working from home now. I have a company that says, hey, I need to put in a business license. I got 3 employees working from home in your county. So that it'd be that. Major home occupations would include, arts and crafts. I've made reference to, online sales, whether it be crafts or another example is firearms. Sometimes, as I said, maybe a small bakery. I think even the Taylor Bell's ice cream started out as a major home occupation. So, but then hers is a mobile activity, but she keeps an office at the house and does storage there as well. So.
They make it on the property.
So, but it's sort of, and things that are not listed, either fall at my discretion as whether or not I think it's appropriate as a major home occupation, or the Board of Zoning Adjustments could do the same if I presented to them, because the code does not define
Major home
anything that
occupation.
could possibly, because people come up with new ideas to make money all the time. I'm like, take it to the board, see if they think it's appropriate. Which allows me the opportunity to do that analysis of traffic, and do customers come to the home, do deliveries, or do you require deliveries from the tractor trailer, or does it come through the mail, things of that nature. So
Okay. Since it is, if the court is okay, I'm gonna have Robert put on the, next agenda, which would be November the 4th, at 9 a.m., the removal of the RB zoning district. And in the meantime, Robert, if you can work out some definitions for residential recovery, that would be helpful, and present that to us at that time, if you can. And with, at least, that's what we can take from this hour meeting today. Is that okay with everybody?
So we're gonna, so the directive is to remove one zoning district out of what was discussed today, and then will we come back and discuss other issues? I think as Squire Muller said, proximity, density within the facility. The definition, I think that Squire Blackburn brought up, and then the number of facilities, right? We don't know, but I think those, I mean, is that right, or is that?
As long as we can be organized and it doesn't consume.
We're getting there, Jed. We're getting there, Jed.
I mean,
We're learning how to ride a bicycle, and we just learned how to pedal. Now we gotta learn how to steer, put the brakes on. So yeah, you understand the analogy. Where we're going. Is that okay?
I teach it.
Huh?
I do understand.
Okay.
So at our next meeting, will we have a similar discussion to what we've had
We won't
today?
meet an hour before because it's the 9, but we can spend 15 to 20 minutes if we need to. We'll put it up there at the top for discussion.
Okay.
Continued discussion.
Okay.
Is that what Tamara will call it? Continued discussion? Tamara,
Okay.
okay? All right. All right. Everybody okay?
Yes,
All right, it's 5 o'clock. I'm gonna give you 2 minutes to go, and,
Thank you.
to the restroom. And I mean, 2 minutes. And we're coming back. Those of you that are